give the people time. Give people what they want.
Now let's take a look at some unused objects. Some are either present inside a wall or in other inaccessible place, while others are still interactable, because instead of being deleted, they're simply invisible. In Iron Gate, after the first locked door, there is a room with an elevator that leads to a tight tunnel, and after that you drop into a room. Before that room, to the right, there's a dash panel inside the wall. In White Jungle, near the start, there is a dash panel misplaced below the starting tunnel. Additionally, there are two on either side of the one that Shadow falls on to start the level. But this isn't all, there are more objects located out of view. They include floating platforms, lines of rings, more dash pads, two invisibility capsules, a weird spinning object, and numerous beetle robots. These objects don't seem to have much connection and are located in such a way that the player would never see them normally. However, they do make more sense once you replace Green Forest's layout with this one, as it becomes evident that they're left over of a very early version of Sonic's counterpart of the level. The attributes of some objects are broken though, such as the jump panel, which will always kill you. The version of Green Forest seen in here is very incomplete, with some objects suggesting it.
Now that everybody's here, I just want to say that we should all live in peace and harmony, guys. No more arguing. This is a beautiful world we live in.
Ten-star reaction to Momaham.
Why you? Oh my.
Even be older than the one shown in the E3 2000 trailer, a very interesting trailer which I'll also only be covering in the next video. If you hack Sonic or Shadow into Meteor Herds, a hidden rail can be found. One end begins on the central tower, leads sharply downwards and features two successive loops, and the other ends near the starting point. As Knuckles can't grind in this game, the rail is normally unseen. If you turn around and grind backwards on the starting rail of Final Chase, you'll see that the rail actually starts quite a bit back compared to where Shadow spawns. However, it won't have any collision until you reach a nearby spring, which usually goes unseen yet is actually what the game uses to launch Shadow onto the rail. An unused object that was meant to be pushed and pulled can be found. The hint box from Sonic Adventure is strangely left over in this game, as is that game's item box, and some kind of debug reference object can be found, although its purpose is unknown. And there are also a few hidden rings placed in bizarre locations in certain levels, usually below the starting point. The reason for their existence is anyone's guess. As for unused models, when Sonic uses the Lightspeed Dash, an after image model can be seen during it. While Shadow doesn't use this normally, he does have the appropriate model, but never goes used. Here is an untextured log from Green Forest, and here is another one. This is a broken version of the treasure chest from Wild Canyon, and an older version of the skybox seen in the Grind Race. It's a well-known fact at this point that Sonic's shoes were changed to the soap shoes late in development. As you can imagine, most of the game was already done by that point, so there's a bunch of leftovers regarding this. The hero story intro has Sonic wearing his classic shoes until he jumps onto the wing. The shuttle launch scene in the Dark Story still shows them, and one of the screenshots from the credits still shows them. All of these were fixed in battle, however all of the game's artwork still depicted him with the classic shoes until the 2012 re-release. Present in all of Sonic's cutscene texture files are textures for the shoes, the original Lightspeed shoe upgrades, and a number of blank files. Of note is that these textures feature red souls, as opposed to the grey souls seen in early prototypes and screenshots. Now let's take a look at some cutscene oddities. Several interesting things can be found hidden in events, whether off-screen or left in the files. In the scene where Sonic is in jail, when the camera focuses on Amy, Sonic continues playing animations. Despite being impossible to see, Knuckles has complete mocap animations for when he's under the manhole in this cutscene. During Sonic's side-eye hardline, Shadow is walking off-screen, notably in a different position to the previous shot. He disappears entirely for the shot with the Chaos Emeralds. A different version of this cutscene's map includes an early version of the room's control console, albeit off-screen, being partially visible in the Maria flashback on Prison Island. In this cutscene, Eggman T-poses until the camera reaches him. There is a large unseen light effect in the Maria flashback. This was corrected to appear in battle. There is a wall in this cutscene's last shot that was intended to hide the black void behind Shadow. Since it fails to do so, it suggests the camera was originally in a different angle. During one of Rouge's shots in one of the final cutscenes of the Dark Story, Shadow pokes himself in the eye in what's likely an early animation of him answering Eggman's call. The super transformation was intended to be part of the event before it, but it was instead split. Knuckles, the Master Emerald, and the shadow of Sonic's position at the end of the previous event are still around off-screen briefly at the beginning of the transformation cutscene. Knuckles only has his right hand displaying upgrades, which is weird. Most cutscenes that are seen in the game read their information from a PRS file, which is a compressed source containing assets for the events. There are two exceptions to this rule, Event 0203 and 0210, which are the cutscenes where everyone listens to Gerald's diary and the credit sequence in the last story respectively. The versions that are used by the game are present in bin files, which are uncompressed. Even with this, compressed PRS files for them do exist, yet go completely unused and have a few differences compared to the used versions. Editing them to become readable reveals that they're either incomplete or from an earlier point in development. For Event 0203, Knuckles sports an early sunglasses model and a full version of his hammer gloves, and Rouge's treasure scope is complete instead of missing the eyepiece, as well as the rings being the in-game variant instead of the higher quality models used in other cutscenes. As for Event 0210, Knuckles' glove upgrades are present in the data, but never render in this scene, nor does his head in fact. And while Amy isn't present in the data at all, her drop shadow is still rendered throughout the scene. Leftover effect data for the scene where Knuckles stops the Chaos Emeralds can also be found within the game files. Implementing them into the cutscene reveals an early draft of what was eventually used for the scene, with only the video overlay timings being consistent with the final effect data. Several effects are missing, such as the initial fade-in and the lighting changes for specific shots, along with rough subtitle and audio timings and the lack of music. There is an unused in-level cutscene that displays Sonic doing a short animation for his head and hands. It lasts for 20 seconds and has a texture mapping issue that replaces Sonic's sclera with the texture used for the flame ring. This can be fixed and was fixed for SA2 Battle, even though it also goes unused there. There are a few event files in the game that are used to display timestamps before in-game events or stages, such as at the start of most of Knuckles' levels. Weirdly, these events seem to be built from a partially blanked version of that Sonic cutscene, as his hands float behind the camera and perform the same animation. This can also be seen in the shadow image after the last story. The lighting is too dark to see in the Dreamcast version, but this was left over in the ports, where you can actually see them. Some events have additional sets of lighting data that seem to be left over from earlier builds. The Dreamcast version ignores them, but they cause issues in SA2 Battle because all of them get used at the same time for some reason. Event 0106, Shadow's first flashback at Radical Highway, contains the textures for the in-game external model of the Ark. There was originally a shot of Shadow being ejected from the Ark in a capsule in the same way as Sonic, but it was removed. Though it was removed from the event itself, it wasn't removed entirely, as it was used in the trailer for the last story. It's easily overlooked and mistaken for Sonic's version, as Shadow can only be seen inside the capsule for a single frame as it passes the camera. In the Dark Story intro, the level 1 door texture has its name written at the top. The two cutscenes in the Ark score before the Super Transformation contain an early version of Super Shadow's body texture, making him silver rather than gold. According to texture names, the Chaos Emerald colors were shifted around during developments, mainly the ones from Security Hall and the fake emeralds. And here is a better look at the alert texture I've shown you before. Interestingly, the redesigned Power OK icon in the later version is never used. There are also several timestamps that are never used, but they are not very interesting. The Japanese version also has an exclusive unused timestamp, meant to be used in Security Hall. Lastly, there are a lot of subtitles and voices that are loaded for events but never used due to their placement data being dummied out, with most of these instructions being found in early Japanese files for the cutscenes where some of these lines are played, even though mostly at incorrect timings. Even so, it's possible to restore these behaviors, and there is a mod for the PC version by Speeps Highway